Shalom everybody, Akiva Gersh here from Vegan Rabbi, and I want to share with you a thought from a Torah portion just a few weeks ago. We're now towards the end of Sefer Devarim. We're in Kitavod this week, but going back a few weeks to Parshat Re'eh, I want to bring up something that is very profound and very important when we're talking about this connection between Judaism and how we eat, what we eat, specifically vegetarianism and specifically veganism. And there's a pasuk that says, Ki yachiv Hashem Elokecha et gvulcha, when Hashem will expand the borders of your land, kasher deverach, like He spoke to you, v'mata ochla basar ki ta'avei nafshecha, and you will say, I will eat meat because I have a yearning, a desire in my soul, l'chol basar, to eat meat, b'chol avat nafshecha tochal basar, with all like the appetite or desire of your soul, you shall eat meat. So there's a very, very interesting commentary on this one pasuk, on this one verse, from the Balatoim, who is Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, who was a big Rav from about 750 years ago in Europe, who wrote very, very important works of halacha and commentary on the Chumash, the Torah. And he says here, he loves to kind of talk about things that are next to each other in the Torah, and talk about why they're next to each other, why specifically one thing is talked about next to another thing. And he says here, and right next to this, it says ki yirchak, that Hashem will make far, because the very next pasuk says ki yirchak mimcha makom, right? That it talks about that Hashem will kind of make far for you or distance from you this place. Talking about Jerusalem, but again, it's another idea, but still he talks about why they talked about it in juxtaposition to each other. And he says the reason why the words ki yerchak are put right next to this pasuk that's talking about a person's desire to eat meat, check this out, lomar, that is to say, shitvachek adam melechol basar, that a person should distance him or herself from eating meat. Beperek Kisuri Adam in the Gemara, like he says that as it's brought down in a certain chapter in the Gemara in Chulin. I think it's a very powerful statement from a Rav, a European rabbi, 750 years ago approximately, to give over it in one of his most important works these words that say it is better for a person to distance him or herself from eating meat. We're used to hearing those kinds of things today, more in our generation, because of what's happening in the meat and the dairy industry. But to hear that 750 years ago, in a world that is so different than ours today, and still, he finds it important to bring up in one of his most important works, and one of the most important commentaries on the entire Torah, that it's best that a person should distance him or herself from eating meat. And he refers to the Gemara in Chulin, and I just want to take a quick peek. This takes a lot of time to really go into the depth, but I want to pull out two quick things, and with that we'll say Shabbat Shalom. He says, or the Gemara says, he refers to the Gemara that says two powerful teachings the Gemara brings up. It says in the Gemara in Pei Dalid, page 84 in Chulin, the first side, Amud Aleph, says Talmud Lomer, like it says in the pasuk Asher Yatud, right? That it should be trapped. It's talking about like an animal that gets trapped. And the Gemara says Lamdar Torah derech eretz, that the Torah taught derech eretz, just like a good way to be. Shelo yochal adam basar, that a person should only eat meat ele b'hazmana hazot, only with this kind of preparation. Meaning what? Right? Trapping is not a normal kind of thing. And Rashi says over here in the Gemara, on this specific part of the Gemara, right, that is to say, Rashi says, that a person should not get used to eating meat. A person, he says, lo yochal basar tadir, right? A person should not always eat meat. Why, Rashi says? So as not to become poor. Right? And that in and of itself is a very profound and deep teaching with many, many layers. And I'll just say this. First of all, it's Rashi and the Gemara, Rashi on the Gemara, Rashi in conjunction with the Gemara, is telling us, don't get used to eating meat so much. Eat it sparingly. Right? That's one teaching. The second teaching, Rashi is saying, Don't eat meat so much that you become poor, right? Because meat is more expensive than other foods. But I think in our modern day world, in our 21st century world, the idea of poor, what is poor, it takes on a whole different meaning. It's not just like I'll have less money in my wallet or my bank account if I eat too much meat, but I might make the world poor because of all the things that the meat and dairy industry are doing to the world, to the environment, to the animals, to the air, to the water, to the soil, right? Making our world poor. Right? Rashi said these words almost 1,000 years ago, right? And meant it in one context, but I think we can still understand his timeless words in our context and in another context, right? What it means to become poor as a result of eating meat. Right? And the other thing the Gemara says over here, in conjunction with eating meat, it says that the Torah is teaching derech eretz. Right after this, it says, "Shelo yochol adam basar ela leteavon." Right? That a person should only eat meat if he or she really, really wants, and not just stam, not just because I'm used to eating meat, so I'll eat it 2 or 3 times a day. When I was growing up, literally, I ate meat 2 or 3 times a day. The impact on my body, on my health, on the world, on the environment was drastic. Right? And the Gemara is saying here, only when you really feel that need and that desire, should you really come to eating meat. Which means most of the time, you should not be eating meat. Right? And the Gemara goes on to say, basically here, that Yachol yikach adam min hashuk. That means the person should go to the shuk, to the market, and grab an animal whenever he or she wants. It says no. Right? And then it quotes another pasuk, right, which is saying, only if the animal belongs to your herd. Right? This is back in the day when people were more farmers and shepherds and they had their own animals, but it also speaks of this idea that you should have a relationship with your food. You should know where your food comes from, specifically you're eating meat. You should know the story behind the meat that you're eating. Not just stam, go to the store and pick up a package of ground meat, beef from the shelf that's wrapped in plastic and has a price tag slapped on it. But you should know that this is actually a life. There was an animal that was living, right, that was killed, that was slaughtered, so that you should fulfill this deep desire of yours to eat meat. So the Gemara here in Chulin is saying very interesting things in conjunction with the Balatorim on the Parsha a few weeks ago, saying ideally, right, a person should distance him or herself from eating meat. But if they're going to eat meat, do it with such consciousness, right? Do it only if you have to. Don't get used to eating meat. Don't make yourself or the world poor as a result of eating meat, and make sure you have a relationship with the food that you're eating, especially if that food is coming from the animal kingdom. I want to wish everyone a peaceful and healthy Shabbat Shalom. All the best.